Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. The name is Stephanie Bree. I'm a transgender woman. I'm also a chaos witch and a pagan. Practicing pagan, you could say lapsed practicing witch, but nonetheless, I did a 2-hour in-depth video that sort of went into the timeline of how I started out in sort of, you would just say in general, occult and spiritual witchcraft and paganism, but not really officially paganism, and then into Christianity, and then into specifically Catholicism, and then kind of rediscovering paganism and witchcraft. Now, before I get into too deep into this video, which is going to be what I actually believe, and I've got a list of topics here, this is going to be an in-depth one. If this one goes too long, I'll break it into a third part. Because these are going to be, I'm going to cap them at about 2 hours. So if I get to like an hour and 50 minutes and I still got more to cover, I'll probably wrap up and then do a future third video at some point in time. So there's a few things I have to point out as sort of a baseline. Number one, I'm not, and neither is anybody else on this planet, an authority on religion or witchcraft or anything else. I can only tell you what I believe, and I can give you a rough generalization of where I get these beliefs. And then I also want to point out that I have done research, extensive research, via documentaries. I took classes on this subject in college, read books on all the different mythologies and world religions, the history of religion, the origins of religion, and all these different things. I've also read extensive books on the occult and, spiritual practices, witchcraft, and satanic rituals, and demonology, and necromancy, and those sorts of things. So I'm not coming at this like I have a PhD or anything, but I am coming at this as more than just, oh, I played Dungeons and Dragons and I guess I believe this. The next thing I want to do before I dive too deep is make a couple of, clarifications from my previous video, which was done, I was pretty angry in that video, because whenever I talk about Christianity or the Bible, I do tend to get worked up. But also, I'm 42 years old. I have bipolar disorder and borderline personality disorder and PTSD. So sometimes some of my childhood and earlier memories, especially pre-transition, can be a little fuzzy in my brain because I blocked a lot of that out on purpose. So a couple of things I want to clarify. I mentioned having been a minister at some point in my past and starting churches. Well, okay, that gives the image that is not exactly accurate to what I did, but I'm going to clarify. It would have been more accurate to have called me and what my brother-in-law did as evangelists, not necessarily quote-unquote ministers. We were never called ourselves pastors, but I did not attend seminary officially, and I was never ordained officially. My brother-in-law was. He did go to seminary. He was ordained. And what we did, him and we did this on 3 separate occasions. We would, wherever we lived, whatever town we lived in, we would knock on people's doors, and we had our own sort of interpretation, our own doctrine based on what he studied and what I studied, which we were like miles apart on most stuff. So we would just sort of like find the areas that we could agree on, and what we would do is knock on people's doors, and we would invite them to home churches, is what we called them. And so when I say we started churches, it would be more accurate to say we started congregations. But a church, that's all a church is. It's just a congregation of Christians or believers or whatever. So it is technically accurate to say we started churches, but it is more accurate to say we started home churches. And we did this on 3 separate occasions. And then my sister divorced the wacko. Yes, he was a wacko. I'll say it. Come at me, Michael. And then I brushed him aside and then swept him under the rug. He's no longer a part of my life because he's my sister's ex-husband, and, well, that's what you do with the ex. You sweep them under the rug and brush them aside. That being said, the last point of clarity I want to point out is I may have overstated my parents as independent fundamental Baptists. I have to go into a little bit more clarity on a couple of things. My parents never really identified as Baptist. They just identified as non-denominational Christians, which is what I identified as myself. However, we attended more Baptist churches than non-Baptist churches, but we didn't exclusively attend Baptist churches. In that first church I talked about, the one where my sisters had their, conversion experience, and I went forward and told the pastor, let's say the prayer and get me baptized. That was just a Christian church. It wasn't an affiliated, nor was it, I don't even believe it was an evangelical church. I don't 100% remember what they preached because, like I said in that video, I wasn't really paying attention. I did pay but I have to point out, I wasn't paying attention in the sermon. I never did, ever, at any church. I did pay attention in Sunday school, but in Sunday school, they're just trying to teach you the 10 Commandments and Noah's Ark and how to be a, quote, good Christian. They're not really teaching you doctrine, at least when you're in 6th grade, which is what age level that was in. So they're not really getting into the deep stuff that they would in a sermon. So, again, I want to make sure I clarify those statements so you have a better understanding of where I am coming from. I did study the Bible a lot, but I'm gonna point out a couple of two things. One, I never stuck to any specific translation of the Bible. Mostly I studied King James Version because that's what a lot of evangelicals focus on, and that is what my parents primarily used, although my mom did originally get us NIV Bibles before we went King James only. And two, not only did I study read different versions of the Bible, I also read the differences between the Catholic Bible and the non-Catholic Bible, essentially the apocryphal books and the stuff that the Lutherans and their descendants, which would be all non-Catholic churches that are not Eastern Orthodox, they're all descendant of the Lutheran Church. I don't give a crap what they say. This is historically proven that you can actually go and look at, here's the date this church was founded. This is the guy that founded it. This is well documented. Okay, so let's push that aside for a second. So I do know the differences between the Catholic, Orthodox, and non-Catholic Christian churches. As far as I'm concerned, a Christian is a Christian. If you believe Jesus Christ died on the cross, and I don't care what else you believe above and beyond that, that makes you a Christian. That's what most Christians will tell you. And I'm gonna agree with that. As long as you believe that, you're a Christian, and it doesn't matter which rituals or prayers or beliefs you follow beyond that. Because that's what every Christian church I've ever been to essentially taught. The blood of Christ as the most important thing. Now that I got the disclaimers out of the way, let's get into my first one. My first topic is gods and deities. Now, I'm going to define a god or a deity as an immortal, supernatural being that is in the hierarchy of the universe above humans. That's going to be the definition I use for this video. In my previous video, I mentioned the 12 deities or deity-like spirits that I have personal relationships in various capacities. And I didn't dig too deep into my sources on that, and I'm not going to here either. I'm just going to give you what I believe and where relevant how I came to that belief. I'm a pagan, but pagan is not a organized, structured religion. There is no book on how to be a pagan, or this is what pagans believe. So I get a lot of my beliefs from my own research, reading books on witchcraft, mythology, talking to other pagans, listening to pagan podcasts, reading pagan blogs and books and articles written by pagans, watching pagan videos by pagans on paganism, and watching videos on paganism from academic non-pagan perspectives, and yes, even doing a lot of research from the perspective of Christians. Christians, especially Catholics, before there were other non-Catholic Christians, went into the various pagan cultures and tried to Christianize them. And in doing so, they either destroyed the temples and texts that the pagans would have utilized. Most often, this is what they did, or converted it into a Christian temple, like I said, Christianized it. The other thing they did a lot of was they would destroy the pagan texts and then, burn them at the stake if they would continue to practice paganism. This is fact. This happened. This is historical fact. This is verified. But the other thing they did was they wrote down in their books from a Catholic perspective their interpretation of the pagan rituals. Which means we do not have a single first source on any pagan culture from the European paganism tradition. Obviously, this is different in the Hindu cultures, which are not necessarily... They're pagan in their own way, in this sense. The word pagan has two meanings. The classical meaning is folk religion. So you have organized religion, which would be the religion of Rome, the Olympians, the deists, and then you had the Norse, the Vikings. They had a structured religion that we would call paganism, but it was they had a structured religion that today we call paganism, using the second definition, which is non-Christian. That's the more broadly used definition, but it originally just meant folk religion, or religion of the people, specifically the country folk. So you had the city folk that had their temples and their priests and their rituals and their organized religion, and this is in pre-Christian cultures and in Christian cultures, post-Christian cultures, conquest, Roman Empire, etc. Even during the quote Holy Roman Empire, which was a separate thing, but related but unrelated. And so, what we have is Christians documenting what they think pagans believed from a Christian lens, and I say Christian, more accurately, a Catholic lens. And then I'm not going to get my dates here, but sometime in the post-Middle Ages. It's going between the Middle Ages into the Renaissance period. Martin Luther broke away. He was a Catholic priest. He broke away from the Catholic Church and he started the Lutheran Church. And then the Lutheran, and this was in Germany, they spread out. And then separate but related to that, I think it was King James or King George, one of the two. Again, I'm not a historian, so I'm not going to be 100%. One of the kings of England, in England, the king was also kind of sort of the Bishop of England, I guess. They were a religious figure. Basically broke away from the Catholic Church to found the Church of England, which we today refer to as the Anglican Church. And so they started out very heavily Catholic, but also influenced by the Lutherans, who were like, hey, you know what, you don't have to be Catholic. So they are the ones that came up with the King James Version of the Bible, and they were the one, and to this day, that's the only authorized version that you can get in an official, affiliated Anglican church, is the King James Version, because they're the ones that wrote it, they're the ones that commissioned it, it's their book. Everybody else that uses the King James Version is taking their book and then interpreting it how they want to interpret it. Not necessarily how the Anglicans interpreted it, by the way. They're the ones that picked and chose which books to throw out, which verses to translate, and how to translate them. This is kind of important because this also goes back to the Anglicans were the ones who came over originally, the Pilgrims, to get away from, and some of the Puritans were in that family to get away from the oppression of the Catholic Church. But also there were non-Anglicans who were also non-Catholics who didn't know where they fit, who were among the pilgrims and the migrants who came over to America. And this is part of the whole, religious freedom movement that they proposed when they founded the colonies initially. They did not practice this. Once they established their colony, there were 13 of them eventually, each religious sect basically legitimized their religion as the official state religion, not meaning state as in state United States, but state as in, the colonies were recognized sort of loosely as states. The official government religion. Like, you had to be, if you were in Puritan Maine, you had to be a Puritan. Otherwise, they burned you at the stake and called you a witch or a heretic. This goes back to the well-documented Salem witch trials, which is separate but also related. And then there was the Christians within the Puritans who didn't want to be Puritans, who broke away and started new colonies. And so this was all happening, and then the American Revolution happened. Two things happened post-Revolution. The first thing that happened was the Anglicans who stayed in the colonies severed ties with the Church of England, because you can't be Church of England if you're not a part of England. You can and you can't. It's complicated. But at that time, the Church of England was like, no, you've cut ties with us. You're not Anglican anymore. And the Americans, because they were no longer British anymore, they no longer identified themselves as English people, they now identified themselves as Americans. They, and I'm going to get back to this all in a minute, just bear with me, I promise. They wanted to continue going to their, Anglican temple, church, whatever you want to call it, and practicing the Anglican religion, but they had to establish their own American version. And this is where we get the Episcopal Church, or the Episcopalian Church. They have, in subsequent generations, sort of reconciled with the Church of England, but only, in so much. But again, it's really freaking complicated. But once that happened, and then you had the Puritans, and then you had these different groups breaking away, this is when you started to get the Baptist movement. And I'm not going to get into the whole history of that, but they were the ones that went down into the South and were really popular in the slave states. This is one of the reasons why the Southern Baptist Church eventually broke away during the Civil War, because they were pro-slave, and the Northern Baptist Church, which just became the American Baptist Church, were anti-slave, and so the churches split over the slave issue. A lot of Southern Baptists, and I can confirm this firsthand because I went to Southern Baptist churches, and I have a lot of former friends who were Southern Baptists, and a couple of Southern Baptist preachers. They still believe, to this day, that the African people are inferior to white people. This is where a lot of this white supremacy racism comes from. Especially the ones who are still have familial ties, ancestral ties to the Confederacy. So let's get back to gods, right? We don't really have a lot of documentation, first source documentation, on anything outside of Christianity in regards to the European religions. And the reason why I wanted to give this whole brief overview of history is because it illustrates that the Christians were not only oppressing non-Christian religions, they were oppressing non-conformist Christians that didn't agree with them. This is continuing even to this day, which is why in the U.S. alone, we have over 40,000 documented, separate, unconnected denominations of Christianity who all think that they're the only ones, the only true Christians, more or less. Now, there are various ones like Lutherans, Methodists, Catholics, and some Baptists and independent churches who kind of sort of like, hey, let's all be friends, but also you're wrong, we are right, but we can be friends. And then there are those that are like, no, we are right, you're going to hell, you're not a real Christian. Those do exist. But I don't want to make a blanket statement like that's all Christians, because it probably isn't. And it isn't all the ones I've met in real life. And I'm still friends with some people who consider themselves Christian, and they go to church and read the Bible and pray to Jesus and blah, blah, blah. But if you step outside of Christianity for a second, because Christianity is going to tell you that all of the non-Christian gods are demons who tricked people into false religions. Well, if you step outside of Christianity from a historical standpoint, no, that's impossible, because the pagan religions are older. There were people worshiping Brigid and Thor and Loki and Odin and Astrea and etc., Pan and everybody else, long before Christianity was a thing, even before Judaism was a thing. Because you got to remember, Judaism comes out of the Israelite religion once it was codified with the Levitical law, which we get from the book of Leviticus and Numbers and a couple other places in the five Deuteronomical, I can't remember the word they use. The five books, the 5 books of the Bible that make up the law, the quote law. But if you look at the history of the Jewish people, the Israelites, before there was an established Jewish religion, the Israelites were polytheistic. And they got a lot of their beliefs from Mesopotamia, a lot of them from Babylon, and the other empires of the time in the Middle East. In later centuries, when they were codifying pre-Orthodox Judaism, they were borrowing heavily, as were the early Christians, before they were formalized into what would become the Catholic and Orthodox churches, when they were still in that transition phase from going from Jews who believed in Christ to fully Christian. They were borrowing beliefs from Zoroastrianism, another religion that is older than Christianity. So this is my way of saying, here's where I get my belief. My belief is that, more or less, I believe all the pantheons are real. They're real physical or metaphysical creatures or beings from who knows where. Every one of them, the Jews, the Christians, the Muslims, I can't remember all the names. I'm just going to say the Greeks, the Romans, the Germans, the Vikings, the Celtics, everybody. They all have this belief that their God came from somewhere. Came from somewhere else. Came to our universe. And have different creation stories where they each claim that they created the earth. Their gods created the sea and the life and the animals and the stars and blah, 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 blah. And each religion, each god has their own dominion. Some of them are gods of war. Some of them are gods of agriculture. Some of them are gods of the ocean or the underworld or the sky or whatever. I do believe that at some point in the very distant past, pre-human even, these interdimensional beings came from somewhere else, established themselves in our realm, and noticed or observed the evolution of the primates becoming humans, and various ones sort of globbed onto the different primates that were receptive to their existence, and were teaching the humans, hey, we're this. Oh, the humans think we're gods. Okay, we're gods. And so now we're going to tell them stories, and they're going to believe whatever we tell them. So I do not believe that the creation stories, none of them, are purely scientific accurate, including the Christian story. Because we have irrefutable scientific evidence that the Big Bang happened, and that's the origin of the universe. And we have irrefutable scientific evidence that, star dust crash landed on, primitive Earth and the heat and and everything else mixed with the steam and eventually the ice, and that turned into water, and that created single-celled organisms, and those evolved into aquatic organisms, and then the plant life and land-based organisms, and then eventually dinosaurs, and then they went extinct, and then humans came along sometime after. Okay, so any religion that denies that happened, we can automatically either dismiss entirely as false, or at least, inaccurate to a degree. Because this can be proven. This can be proven with science. You cannot just dismiss it. So, taking that and taking what I believe about the gods, I believe that they had a limited, we would say supernatural, but I'm going to say metaphysical power to exist in our world. But for whatever reason, in every one of our myths have some sort of war. Even Christianity has a war between the angels and the demons. They all have some sort of war between, like, the gods and the giants, or the gods and the frost giants, or the gods and the titans. Every single culture, even all of them, have some sort of myth about there were the gods, or those who claimed they were gods, and those who were not gods, or who did not claim they were gods, or were not recognized as gods. Some sort of war, and then all of the gods left Earth at some point in the past. In the Jewish, Judeo-Abrahamic tradition, Jewish, Christian, Muslim tradition, this comes in the story of the Garden of Eden. Their God, basically they sinned, the original sin. Eve ate the fruit, and then Adam ate the fruit, and then God kicked them out of the Garden of Eden, and then separated himself from earth and went to go reside in heaven, and left the humans to their own devices. This is exactly what they, and I'm paraphrasing, so don't get into the specifics, but this is what the Abrahamic, and by extension Christian churches, believe. They believe that God used to live on earth in the Garden of Eden with the humans, and then he left. So I do believe that at some point in the past, all of the various gods did exist on Earth and did interact with the primitive humans, probably Neanderthals and their immediate evolutionary offspring, and then realized for whatever reason either they weren't getting enough, psychic energy or whatever, they left, or they took that energy and went and created some space up in what we would call the heavens, because every one of them has essentially, it's more complicated in some versus others, but essentially they all believe in 3 layers of existence: an underworld, or hell, if you will, the physical world, earth, and then some higher world where the angels and the gods live, the heavens, or heaven. They all have different names for this: Mount Olympus, or the Tree of Life, or Midgar, or whatever. There's different words for the different realms. Again, going back to science fiction, which again is not a accurate source, but we could still draw upon it for at least philosophical ideas. Within science fiction, there's this belief that any technology that is sufficiently advanced will be indistinguishable from magic. I'm talking to you from a piece of plastic, transmitting this over the air. That's magic. If I went back in time and did what I'm doing, the Neanderthals or the even the early Christians or pre-Christians or whatever, any point in time, if I went back in time and could use my cell phone, or could use an AK-47 or a fucking, automobile, a Tesla or whatever, they would think I was a god and that I was practicing magic. Because to them, I've got powers and abilities that they can't comprehend, that they cannot obtain. So, I believe that what we think of as gods are just some, I'm going to use the word interdimensional or extraterrestrial beings that came from somewhere else, that found their way to Earth, and humans were so primitive that we just assumed they were gods. Now, that's the physical and metaphysical aspect of it, but there's also the spiritual and the supernatural aspect, which I'm going to kind of sort of get into. Because I also believe that all living creatures, plants, insects, spores, fungus, humans, cats, dogs, elephants, everything, dinosaurs, whatever, anything that has consciousness or life, and I'm saying or life, because plants, to the best of our knowledge, don't have consciousness, but I'll get into that, has a soul or a spirit or an energy within it that is going to leave its physical being when life no longer exists within that thing. Essentially, it becomes dead. This energy has to go somewhere. Again, this goes back to what I've talked about previously. This part is science, again, that we can measure. We know energy cannot dissipate. It cannot cease to exist. It can change states. Energy can become matter. Energy can become gas or plasma or whatever. But it can't just cease to exist. And so I essentially believe that the gods did come to Earth way before this is prehistory, before humans had written word, and did their thing, and for whatever reason couldn't stay, or decided that they got what they needed and went back to where they came from, or went and created a new dimension somewhere else. I don't know. But this is where we get the three, the hell, heaven, earth, hell. Various, or you could say underworld or land of the dead or whatever. Sheol in Old Old Testament Judaism. Abraham's bosom in, the New Testament Judaism, pre-crucifixion. They refer to it as Abraham's bosom. Which, again, I never really had anybody in any religious authority ever explain to me what Abraham's bosom was. But it is clearly talked about in the Bible. But nobody really can explain it. Same thing with purgatory. Catholics have the most complete belief on what they think purgatory is. And it's in the Bible. Jesus talks about it. He doesn't use the word purgatory, but he describes what is purgatory very blatantly. And Paul reiterates it in the New Testament. So purgatory is a thing that Christians believe, whether they accept it or not. It's the fire. It's the purging fire. When you die, your sins, your deeds are burned up in a fire, purified, and whatever's left goes on to heaven. Now, there's different Christian denominations have different beliefs in what that fire is, or who's purged, or whatever. But that's essentially what purgatory is. It's not some weird dimension in space where you're stuck. That's what Hollywood will tell you purgatory is. That is not what the Catholic Church teaches purgatory is. The Catholic Church teaches that it's the fire, the state of being burned. You're in the burning, the purifying fire, the purging fire. They don't specify how long you're in that fire or why you're there, but once you get out of it is when you can go on to heaven or hell or whatever. That is what Jesus taught. Now, we're not going to go any further than that. I'm just going to say that's in the Bible. And that is the Catholics have the most complete biblical view on that, because they can actually say, here's the verse, this is what it says, this is what we believe it means. Everybody else just sort of dances around it or dismisses it entirely. Okay, not important. Let's talk about angels. What are angels? Now, in all Christian and non-Christian religions that have gods, they all have subservient entities that are very distinct from one another. There is no uniform image of what an angel is in any religion. However, there are some uniform traits in some subsets of these religions that we can look at and say, yeah, that is sort of what we think of when we think of the word angel. Now, I'm not getting into the terrifying Old Testament creatures, the seraphim and etc., that are described, the cherubim and whatnot in the Bible, because those are not, those are a class of angel, or what some Christians and Jews would say are angels, but they're not what we think. When we think of angel, we think of a human humanoid, genderless figure, probably with wings and a halo. Now, the halo is more of an artistic thing. It's not really official, but it's what people think of. They have a similar image, and I don't remember the exact name the creature is, but they have a similar creature in the Olympian religions. They have the Greek and Roman religions. They have a similar type of creature in the Germanic religion, known as the Valkyrie, which you may be familiar with the Valkyrie from the Marvel Cinematic Universe. There's a character named Valkyrie who was among the Valkyrie, a species, if you will, of angelic beings that served the gods. They were the soldiers, the warriors. Now, in the Celtic religion and some of the folk, and I'm using folk here intentionally, but this would translate to pagan religions, the European folk religions, the Gothic people, for example, some of the Germanic pagans, and some of the others that weren't necessarily fully committed to, Thor and Odin, but whatever. But especially the Celtics, they had a belief in a type of creature known as the Fae, which is what we would classify as their species of angels. And within the Fae, there's a couple of specific types of Fae that are very angelic. That is actually the origin of the image we think of when we think of angel. And this would be the fairy and the nymph. When you look at artist depictions of the nymph and the fairy, that is what we think of today when we think of the word angel. Now, I'm not talking about fairy tale fairies. That's a separate thing. But when you go back and look at the religious fairies, and a lot of this would have been the Catholics were, because at the time they were all Catholic, and I'm talking about in this part of Europe. The other part of Europe, it was Orthodox, but in this part of Europe, the west, the western part of Europe, England, the Scandinavian countries, the Germanic countries, etc. They intermingled with the pagans, and so they took the pagan images and translated that, just copy and pasted that, if you will, onto angels, so that people in the folk religions who were being converted to Christianity or Christianized would have an image they could relate to. Oh, this is what an angel looks like. Oh, okay, that looks like a fairy. But you're saying these are, good spirits. Whereas in the various folk religions, fairies, angels, Valkyrie, etc., they didn't really have what we would classify as, and I'm going to use a D&D term here, good alignment or evil alignment. We would more accurately classify them as chaotic neutral in most cases, or lawful neutral in some other cases. Not necessarily good or evil, but again, I'm just using that as sort of an overview. Because the term evil and the term good, those are subjective, right? There's a passage, and I'm paraphrasing, in the New Testament Bible where it essentially says, more or less, and I'm paraphrasing, in the end times they will call good evil and evil good. What does that mean? Well, it's hard to say. Because the Bible was pro-slavery. So do they think that being anti-slavery is evil? Or is slavery evil? That's ambiguous, so that passage doesn't really apply. Let's toss it out. But it illustrates good and evil are subjective. Because if you genuinely believe like every word of the Bible literally is accurate, then you have to believe in slavery, because the Bible is very pro-slavery. So if you're not pro-slavery, then you probably can't believe the Bible is literally accurate. You can't. Now, I talked a little bit previously about, metaphors and, parables and alliterative type of language that was used in the Bible. Essentially allegories and, things like that. Metaphorical would be a good term. So angels. I do believe that there are a species of creatures that come from probably either the same plane as the gods, or the gods conquered them and brought them with them as their soldiers, that have, again, I'm going to say metaphysical abilities that are above our natural flesh and blood physical abilities without the assistance of science or magic, that they could, again, be above the humans but below the gods. And most of the various mythologies, these, and I'm going to say angelic beings, or, in between human and God, the angelic beings, not necessarily demigod, that's a separate category we'll get into, but these beings are creatures that they found in other dimensions and brought with them to Earth. Now, we do know from our existing science, and again, going back to science fiction, we do hypothesize, and there's ample evidence that suggests that dimensions outside of our understanding exist, we just can't get to them. This is where the multiverse theory comes in. Now, this is going to get into things like black holes and wormholes and things like that. We're just going to sidestep that for a second, because I'm not here to teach you science. That's not what I'm here for. But I do believe that these beings, the gods and the angels, they are interdimensional travelers. However, as powerful as they are, interdimensional traveling of this nature expends a tremendous, astronomical, unfathomable amount of energy, which is probably why they weren't able to stay in our realm for too long, or why they have to send angels or demons or spirits or whatever without crossing over entirely into our physical realm, because they don't have they just can't. It takes up too much energy to cross dimensions. This could very easily be supported by our existing knowledge of physics. Which would help explain why ghosts and poltergeists and banshees, etc., can't really take a physical presence in our world and open and close doors at will. Because it's like, hey, they're there, but they're like, hey, if I'm going to cross over and use up energy, and I'm a spirit, I have a limited amount of energy, why would I do that just because some asshole YouTuber comes into my haunted space and says, move this glass for me? I demand it. And I'm like, I'm not going to give up 1,000 years of my existence off of the worth of energy to move that glass for your fucking benefit. What do I get out of it? But hey, I know that my granddaughter is going to die in a brutal fashion, in the woods. Maybe I'm going to come to her in a dream and tell her, don't go to the cabin with that guy. He's going to murder you. Maybe I'm willing to give up some of my energy for that in a limited capacity. So that, I do believe, is how we get ghosts and spirits and apparitions and things like that. Because they're out there. But they could, if they had access to the energy, cross over. But why would they? Again, well, if they're going to, they have to have a compelling reason. Same with the gods. The gods are like, we can guide your energy to us. We can, after you die, we can lure you to us. We can give you we can give you the way. Here's the path. Follow this path, and you'll end up in our paradise or heaven or whatever, where we can exist forever. Our energies and our consciousness can exist forever, unscathed. But not necessarily. They can't just, open the door, like right now. They can't just open the door to heaven and say, come on up, because that would probably cost them their paradise. They wouldn't be able to maintain it. Same with the other interdimensional beings, the demons, which we're now going to get to. Now, in some myths, and again, this is not just Christianity, but in various myths, there is this, like I talked about previously, the war between the beings, right? The various wars. And so some myths have demons as essentially fallen angels, or they served the gods. They were angelic creatures that served the gods, but turned on the gods for whatever reason. Either they switched sides and went to go be with the Titans or the Frost Giants or whatever. Or they just decided, hey, humans have a right to free will. The gods are being, bullies. Let's teach the humans about free will because, then they can give us their metaphysical energy. Because I believe that if we have a soul and we have a body and we have biological processes inside our bodies and a consciousness, that's the type of energy that all of these different interdimensional beings are trying to get access to because they know they can use it for their purposes, right? So demons want your energy to help them for whatever purposes. Angels and gods and demigods want your energy for their purposes. The fae, the nymphs, the leprechauns, the brownies, the fairies, etc. They want your energy for their purposes. Maybe, maybe not, I don't know. Because different creatures and different beings have different interpretations, right? Now, let's make two assumptions. Assumption A, the Christians are correct and all demons are evil. Then that would make them scary. And this is the prevailing theory in most cultures, whether they're fallen angels or otherwise. There tends to be an overwhelming belief that demons are just inherently evil. Again, evil being subjective here, because what makes them evil is their desire for power, obviously, which is no different than the angels and the gods' desire for power, or the humans' desire for power for that matter, and them wanting humans to have free will to live their lives free of doctrine and dogma and judgment. Is that necessarily evil? Well, it depends. I mean, if setting you free from dogma and doctrine causes you to sin and then that therefore condemns you to an eternity in hell, yeah, that would be probably an evil thing to do. Or if it frees you from the shackles of this God, but frees you up to go over here to this God and go into their heaven, maybe it's not evil. Who's to say? Nobody can say that they sat down face to face, one-on-one, and talked to Jesus or Thor or Lucifer or Satan. Because we usually put those people in padded rooms and pump them full of medication. But I do believe that demons are a separate, and I'm going to say species of creature, metaphysical, interdimensional creature, that is probably comes from a darker dimension and is probably less motivated by light. Maybe maybe the energy they use comes from dark matter or dark energy, which is again theory that our current scientific physicists do propose as a thing, right? Dark matter, dark energy. So it's possible that the demons have found a way to utilize dark energy. They're not interested in protons and photons and things like that because they're like, hey, we get our powers from this place. And so they, by their very nature, stay in the darker, in the shadows, if you will. Now, I have mentioned in my previous video and in other videos that I do have relations with demons or creatures that I believe to be demons, these darker entities. And I've mentioned previously taming demons as pets. I have to specify, I'm not a god, obviously, and I don't, force them into submission. It's more like, hey, let's come to an agreement. I'll help you out if you'll help me out. And like I said previously, I do approach Lilith, who is recognized as sort of the mother of demons, and she's, again, probably from a darker dimension herself, and request her permission, and then she usually, and a lot of this happens in dreams, so take that with a grain of salt, if you will, but it's like, hey, I'd like to have a succubus to serve me in this capacity, not necessarily a sexual capacity, but they get energy from human sexual activity, which is in abundance. So that's a good source of energy. So a succubus is a good demon to have as a pet because there's so much sexual energy floating around, even if I'm not sexually active, that they can draw upon. Rather than like an imp, which has to get its energy from stealing souls or whatever. And it's like, I don't know if I want you feasting on other people's souls. I would probably consider that an evil act. Now, in various cultures, not all, it's not universal, but in various cultures, the demons are relegated to the underworld. And in a lot of cultures, the demons are evil creatures that are attempting, or the devils in some cultures they're classified separately as a separate entity, are trying to trick humans into damning themselves to hell, because the demons are trying to populate hell for whatever reason, whatever their motivation may be. Whether it is in the Christian mythology where it is, hey, we hate God and we hate God's creation, so we're going to hell at the designated time. Let's take as many of those motherfuckers with us as we can. Apologize for the language, but that's their attitude. Yeah, that could possibly be it, but we don't really have a definitive, in any religion, in any mythology, definitive description of hell or the underworld. Mostly what we have comes from Dante's Inferno, which was, more or less a work of fiction, if you will, that we regard as an authority, and then Christian churches globbed onto that, and modern Christian churches use that imagery to describe hell. The Bible itself does not. It says there's weeping and gnashing of teeth, and there's a lake of fire and brimstone. That's it. It doesn't tell us shit all. That's it. That's the only description we get at all in the Bible of what is hell. That's not a very vivid description. That's not a very accurate description. We can make up all kinds of assumptions based on that. That's very vague. There's weeping and gnashing of teeth right here on earth. Go to Gaza. Go to Ukraine. Go to South Sudan. You're going to find weeping and gnashing of teeth. You're going to find fire and brimstone on this planet as well. So, to say that there exists a place where those two things take place, well, yeah, duh. We can see that with our eyes. The other descriptions either come from various other religions. Zoroastrianism, as an example. They're the ones that originated the war between good and evil, essentially. Or, the underworld, which is, you get a little more description of the underworld. You have the river Styx, for example, in the Greek mythology, and that kind of sort of translates over to the Roman mythology as well. And you have a little bit more of a description of the underworld in the Celtic mythology, although it really just says underworld. It doesn't even describe it. It just says the gods went to the underworld for whatever reason. They were chased out of Ireland, essentially the Isles, and they went underground, or wherever they went. So again, there's probably different barriers that are preventing these creatures or beings or entities from crossing over. Now, I touched on ghosts previously. I believe that there are different types of, I'm just going to say post-life spirits. You can become a ghost, you can become a poltergeist, which is a type of spirit, a banshee, etc. Pretty much any type of supernatural post-life spiritual force that has been described, whether it be vampires or whatever, that has been described in any culture across the planet, is probably something that you can become when you die. Essentially, your energy, and maybe your consciousness goes with your energy, maybe it doesn't, but your energy leaves your body after you die. And it either dissipates, or it becomes another type of energy, or whatever. I don't know. It's hard to say. But it's possible that your energy and your consciousness get trapped in the barrier between the worlds. Not able to cross over all the way into, I guess what we would say is heaven, or even purgatory, if you will, or Sheol, or Abraham's bosom, or whatever word you want to use. Or it can't fully cross over into the underworld, or hell, or damnation, or the lake of fire, or whatever word you want to use in that regard. Again, Christians will simplify this down to saying, oh, it's just demons playing tricks on us. Look, even if you believe demons have the powers that you allege that they do, which they may or may not, there's no reason for them to be coming up as ghosts if they can appear as demons. or they can appear in your nightmares, or in mirrors, or in possessed dolls. They have other avenues of doing the things that they allegedly do. Appearing as ghosts is not necessarily something that they need to do, nor would they have any reason to do. So I do not believe that when people encounter ghosts, that's just demons playing tricks on us. Also, I don't really think the demons of the Bible are as powerful as modern Christians give them credit for. The demons of the Bible are basically humans, or human-like beings, genderless beings, because that's the angels are described as basically genderless beings. They don't really have supernatural powers. Some of them do, but I would assume that the ones that had those kind of powers aren't the ones that are populating hell. They're the ones that are, protecting the Garden of Eden, etc. But I don't know. I wasn't there. Neither were you, so you don't know either. This is just based on my beliefs, which is what the point of this video is. I mentioned the Fae. I do believe the Fae exist and are a thing. And again, I think that they are a separate class of creature from an entirely separate dimension. And this is why I believe the Fae sometimes exist in mythologies, but usually separate from the gods and the angels or angelic creatures. They're usually, except for the ones I mentioned, the nymphs and the fairies, they're usually not related to the gods in any capacity. So this would be things like, leprechauns, house spirits is another word that they're described as. This would be elves, gnomes, brownies, pixies, things of that sort. Again, various cultures have different beliefs in house spirits. And more often than not, they're classified as tricksters. More often than not, they're classified as chaotic neutral type creatures, not affiliated with the gods at all, but also not affiliated with humans. They probably come from a separate dimension, which, again, going back to Dungeons and Dragons, and even within some Celtic mythologies, this would be classified as the Fey realm or the Feywild or some variation of those terms, where the Fey can exist. Again, there's different beliefs on the Fey, which again come from various humans who have interacted with them, handing down oral traditions. Because again, the books that we would have had were destroyed, and so we don't currently have access to what they firmly believed or experienced because, well, we don't. And again, we can kind of sort of explain some of this again with, hey, maybe the barrier between our world and their world is becoming impenetrable because they don't have the energy, or there's more dark matter, or things are decaying. I don't know. I can't really say for sure. Neither can you, because you don't have a time machine either, or a TARDIS would be a more accurate machine that you would need, which I don't believe a TARDIS could exist in our universe, but that's neither here nor there. Separate but connected to the Fae are the tree spirits, the tree ants, if you will. Tree spirits are creatures that exist within nature. Again, I believe all living creatures have a soul or a spirit or a type of energy within them. And I believe that if you learn how to communicate with them, you can. I do, in my own way, and I'm not going to describe how, at least not in this video, do communicate with tree spirits specifically. Now, I believe you can also communicate with, flowers and brushes and wheat and crops and things, but the trees are older, wiser, they have more experience, and they're more willing to listen if you're willing to talk to them, because they're going to be around longer, so they're more likely to be interested in talking. A flower is going to be alive for a couple of months. A tomato is going to be alive until it's ripe, and then you're going to eat it. So they're not as likely to want to talk to you, because they're like, hey dude, you're going to eat me and I'm not interested in that. So go away. Oops, I'm dead, now you ate me. So I don't really think you can necessarily get crops, even if they have spirits, which I believe they do, I don't think you can necessarily get them to communicate with you in a desirable manner because they're afraid of you, because they know you're going to kill them and eat them. So they have no motivation to give you shit. Again, apologizing for the language. I've already talked about alternate universes. I very obviously believe in the multiverse. I've mentioned that early on in this video. And I do believe in an afterlife, although I will not define it. I will not say, I believe this is where you go when you die. But I had a couple of pagan friends, and this comes from Wicca, which is a reconstructed form of paganism, that said, essentially, and this is not a direct quote, but this is how my friends quoted it to me, all paths lead to the center. It doesn't tell me squat about what the center is, or what the paths are, or where you're going. But I do believe that it is somewhat accurate, that all various religions will take you more or less to the same place. Some type of dimension that is separate from our understanding. And that might be where the dinosaurs might be. That's where you might be able to ride on a Brachiosaurus or a Stegosaur when you get there. And, I don't know, play fetch with a T-Rex. Who knows? I'm not going to say I believe that necessarily, but I do believe it's a possibility that cannot be proven nor disproven. Magic. Here's where I'm going to get a little fuzzy. I do believe in magic, and again, I've already given you the physics-based basis, scientific basis for my belief in magic. Even though I do not necessarily believe that me using the Wi-Fi to make YouTube videos to send them over the airwaves to you is actual literal magic. In the strictest sense it is. But I also believe in metaphysical magic. I believe that there are forces and energies in nature that we humans can interact with just by way of our consciousness. And that we can shape and manipulate those forces to our will using various methods and rituals, whether it be spells or divinations or whatever. However, I also believe, again, a lot of these forces are limited because we have limited capacity within our brain energies to manipulate the forces around us, and there's contradictory elements. I might be attempting to summon all of the forces of nature to divine the winning lottery numbers. But if I'm not the only person doing that, how is the forces, whatever they may be, going to decide who to give the winning lottery numbers to? Well, there has to be some type of system we can't necessarily comprehend. Here's another way of looking at it. Let's look at magic like this. Let's say magic is, everything's tied together. We're all tied together on a rope. And everybody wants to pull the rope towards them to be able to use the rope to, throw it up over the roof of the house to climb up to the ceiling. But there's only so much rope to go around, and everybody's pulling on the rope in different directions. So maybe I pull enough rope this one time to get the thing I want, but somebody else is pulling enough rope away from me the next time. There's not enough rope for me to access. I know that's not a perfect illustration, but it's sort of how I believe the forces of what we would say magic work. There's energy. There's only so much energy to go around. And if I'm trying to tap into a pool of energy and 10 million other people are tapping into the same pool, all trying to use that pool for different things, there's only so much energy in that pool to go around. We're not all going to be successful in our attempts. And I believe this explains why I can do a very exhaustive ritual or spell, and it'll work once, and then the next time I try it, it doesn't work because I don't have enough energy in the pool. Chaos. Early on in this video, I described myself, and in the past video and on Twitter, I described myself as a chaos witch. Well, I use the word witch to tell people that I practice witchcraft, essentially, or using metaphysical means to summon energies and manipulate them to bend to my will as needed. Again, I have limited abilities to do so because there's only so much magic to go around, and there's 8 plus billion people on the planet Earth, all trying to manipulate the energies for them. And there's also interference from, Wi-Fi and cellular networks and solar flares, etc., etc. So there's a lot of things that can interfere with your ability to cast spells. What does that have to do with chaos? The Big Bang, right? Let's just, boom! Nothing, and then now we have everything, right? That's the Big Bang. And then this ball of mass and energy spun off over here and turned into a star. But the star was weak, and it didn't have a strong core, and it exploded. Another explosion. Boom. This mass of rocks and shit over here clumps together to form a planet, and all the dead shit from that star falls on that planet, and now that planet has stardust, star materials. If it's close enough to another star, and it's in the, quote, Goldilocks zone, maybe it can cool off and it can dissipate, and we can get water and steam and life, and eventually abundance of life, right? But here's an asteroid that comes in out of nowhere, coming from this other, because it's all swirling, and it crashes into that planet and kills all the life on that planet. That's chaos. Chaos is the natural order of the universe. The universe is unpredictable and chaotic. And how that translates to my religious beliefs or my personal spiritual and metaphysical beliefs is chaos is the natural default state of the universe. The universe wants to be in chaos. It does not want to be held together. The universe does not want order, law, structure. Those things are unnatural. And we can see this so much. Whenever humans go out of their way to control the environment or the world around them or other people or wildlife or whatever, shit always goes wrong. Because there's forces that are against you, right? And so that's where I get my belief I'm a chaos witch. It essentially means I'm a nature witch, and I believe that the default state of nature is chaos. Astrology, I'm going to move through the rest of these pretty quickly, some of them. I do believe in astrology, obviously, your physical internal energies, your soul or whatever, are tied to the energies that are in the universe, and the stars are a type of energy, and, we can kind of get some guidance from that. Scrying is a type of divination that I believe in, that I have practiced. There's different methods of scrying. I'm not going to get into the specifics. Tarot. Yes, I use tarot cards. I know how to read tarot. I have read tarot in the past. I'm not an expert at it, and I don't think anyone really is, because a lot of it is just shooting in the dark. But whenever I have done a dedicated like a guided tarot reading, where I'm like consulting the universe, I need answers, I usually get a pretty close approximation to what actually ends up happening. Runes is another type of divination. I do definitely believe in runes. I'm going to do a whole video on runes because the fucking Nazis ruined that one for us. Because the swastika that they used as their hate symbol is a rune, a symbol that witches and pagans use for various specific non-nefarious purposes. And so we have to have a conversation of how do you reclaim pre-Nazi symbols that the Nazis used. Well, that's a complicated matter. Mirrors. I believe that all mirrors, including the screen that I'm talking into and seeing myself projected on, are doorways to other dimensions. I can't explain how it works, but I have seen things in the mirror that should not be in the mirror. And I know you have too, because everybody has stories of seeing things in the mirror that aren't there. Stars, obviously I believe in stars. Duh, that's an obvious one. But I also believe that stars, again, they have energies. They have two or multiple layers of energy. They've got some, measurable energy. They got dark energy. They probably also have metaphysical energy that we can't currently measure. Lunar energy, same thing. What about... Okay, I'm gonna mention these, and then I'm gonna kind of pick and choose which ones I go through. End of the world, heaven, hell, the underworld, rituals, holidays. I've already talked about heaven, hell, and the underworld, so I can, just say you have an idea of what I believe. They're out there, they exist, and we can get to them if we have the right energy and path. But we might need help. Rituals, I do, again, it's part of witchcraft and manipulating energies. I believe that we have ourselves a limited capacity to perform rituals that can manipulate the energies, the forces of nature, if you will, around us. And the end of the world, every mythology has some sort of belief in an end time, the end of the universe, and an end of the world. Again, we're talking about, most of the time, the physical world. Earth will cease to exist. All life as we know it will die. Alright, well, we know that just from atrophy, I'm probably saying that wrong, and just the way things burn out over time, and, things are crumbling and decaying, right? Yeah, the world is going to end at some point. The star that we get all of our energy from is going to explode one of these days, or expand beyond the borders of where the Earth exists, burning it up. Or the Earth is going to collapse or break apart, or a meteorite's going to hit it and crumble it to dust. We don't know, but this planet isn't going to live forever. We can say that with a high degree of certainty. There will become, at some point in the future, a cessation of Earth. It will cease to exist at some point in the future. This is highly inevitable. What do I specifically believe about the end of the world? A lot of prophecies talk about the gods coming back to Earth, waging war with the humans because they're angry at us or whatever. Perhaps you could find within that a belief that the gods are storing up energy, which would imply that, would explain why each one of them is trying to lure you to their belief system, so that you go to their heaven, so they have you as a soul that can fuel them, so that they can come back to Earth. For whatever reason, they want to come back to Earth. I don't know if I necessarily believe that. I think they got what they wanted from us. They've moved on. Now, maybe they want to go somewhere else. The Bible refers to it as the New Jerusalem, the New Earth. Yeah, I think that's a possibility. And again, if the gods, whatever these beings are, do have the capacity to enter a voidless dimension and create a new universe in their image, or in their bent to their desires and their will, well, yeah, they're going to want to do that. If they have the ability to do that, why wouldn't they? And last, I'm going to talk about holidays. This is going to be the last thing it's sort of in my practice, not necessarily a thing I believe, but I do practice a variation of the wheel of the year. So I do celebrate the solstices and the midpoints and the equinoxes. Those are the 12 Celtic pagan holidays, or even you could say Wiccan holidays, but they stole it, or whatever. I shouldn't say stole it, but it is what it is. I also observe a few non-pagan holidays and some non-Celtic pagan holidays, like Yuletide instead of Christmas. And then some, cultural holidays, the 4th of July, Thanksgiving, Labor Day, Memorial Day, a few others. Think of things like, St. Patrick's Day. I have a little cultural heritage in regards to the leprechauns, Irish culture. So yeah, Leprechaun Day, as it's sometimes referred to as, or Wear Green and Drink Beer Day. And that's it. That's more or less everything I believe in regards to the major topics. If you ask me point blank, where do I go when I die? I've attached myself to Mother Bridget. Wherever she goes, that's where I go. That I've made that. That's a commitment. If I'm able to go to wherever she exists when I die, I'll go to her. If she'll accept me, and she has the means to lure me there or guide me there or whatever, that's where I want to go when I die. I didn't touch upon reincarnation. That is a whole separate video that would take way more than an hour to talk about. And I'm not going to give you a thumbs up, thumbs down on if I believe in it or not. Stay cool.